Welcome to the Powerful Introvert Podcast. I'm Greg Weinger. I'm here today with Salvatore Manzi. Welcome, Salvatore.
Thank you. It's great to be here with you.
I'm super excited to have Salvatore on the show. You're a leadership communications coach with over 20 years of experience. You've worked with very high level leaders, and I'd love to hear some of those stories. But you empower people to have a wider impact, and that includes people who are quieter or more analytical or data driven, which sounding a lot like introverts. And so maybe my first question for you, so are you yourself an introvert?
I definitely self-identify as an introvert, and I do specialize in working with more data-driven engineers, scientists, analytical people who oftentimes would consider themselves more quiet leaders or self-identify as introvert. My work sits at the intersection between leadership communications and collaboration, and I work with a lot of leaders in elevating their communication strategies so that they can have more productive meetings, more high functioning teams, and a more inclusive culture of all of us.
It's fantastic. This is very highly relevant to me and to my audience, the types of things I practice in my day to day, but also write about and talk about with my audience. So, if it's all right, we could start out with your story. So, you yourself are on the quieter side. How is it that you got into this field? Because I think for a lot of it, a lot of introverts speaking and public speaking is kind of akin to self-torture. It's, doesn't necessarily come naturally. So how did you wind up in this field of work?
100%. It is torture. It is like turning my body on fire. I my father was a public speaker. He went to the conferences and spoke at different ones. I got inspired to get up on the stage and follow his passion. And what I found is that I didn't really crave the spotlight. What I realized is that it scared me to death. And somebody at the point told me that public speaking is the scariest thing you can do. And I was like, well, if that's the case, I'm going to overcome it. So this sort of determination that I needed to overcome whatever my greatest fear was drove me to keep getting up on the stage. And if anybody out there is ever left a meeting and said, "Oh, I wish I had said," or they presented something and it didn't have the impact that they had hoped for, those are the people that I help. I realized when I wanted to be a better public speaker, most public speaking training is geared towards refining charisma, polishing the extrovert, and not so much for introverts. So I set out to find frameworks that help me organize my thoughts when I want to communicate, techniques for using my body to convey my message in alignment with my framework, and strategies for managing the nerves, managing that fight, flight, freeze syndrome that comes up, and managing that negativity bias. Managing all of those is really where the sweet spot is, and that's where I spend more of my time when I'm working with executives to help them get ahead.
It's covered quite a lot of ground there because I think maybe we could start out with maybe some of the simpler situations and build up. Because if you start out thinking, putting yourself in the keynote position on stage, and this is like tremendous pressure. But a lot of us aren't starting out there. We're starting out just in a meeting of people where this is something that's important for the team or the group, and but I'm struggling to cut in, or maybe there's some louder, more dominant speakers in the room and they're stepping over each other, and how do I break in and be heard in that situation?
That is such a real feeling. Like as an introvert, am sitting there listening to people talk, and I don't need to just say something to say something. Like, okay, it's been said. So like, I will have the tendency to sit back and observe. And when I feel like I have some form of contribution, I'll make it. But the problem is, the longer I wait to speak in that meeting, the more pressure like I feel build up. Like the more gravitas I need to bring, the more importance of that one comment that I make. So one quick hack is to break the seal early. As an introvert in a meeting, get your voice into the meeting within the first 5 minutes. Find some way of adding a simple contribution, whether you're repeating what somebody else said or just commenting on the topic of the meeting, whatever it is, you break the seal, and then the pressure is a little less high when it comes time for you to actually interject. There is no easy way to say it. We just have to learn to interject. And what I would offer is try doing it in low stakes situations. Then you can practice in the real world in a meeting or something like that. To your point, you said like one or two people, like the conversation is flowing, 3 to 4 people, it starts to get a little more complex. Above five, six, all of a sudden, as a quiet leader, I start to feel like, oh, I don't want to, there's like too many people now, there's too many eyes. And then at some point, contextually, I become frozen, right? I like to say that all communication is contextual, depends on who I'm talking to, what I'm talking about, and the environment in which I'm speaking. So there's no tried and fast rule for all situations, but breaking the seal early and developing the skills or the comfort around interjecting in low stakes situation will enable me to, in those high stakes, high intensity conversations, I'll feel more apt to jump in. Let me ask you, like, you have made the pivot, you lead teams. What have you found to be especially useful in breaking into those conversations?
Yeah, thanks for asking that. One of the things I've sort of gravitated to doing is I love to make people laugh. I love to tell a joke, and so if I can get in, the involved in the banter early in the meeting, then I'm participating, and that actually puts me at ease, and then I'm more likely to participate later. So it is kind of I would throw that out there as a way to ramp up. And I actually do try to do something similar in if I am standing up in front of people too, as I try to get in a joke early and get a response from the audience. And there's something about that that it's humor, so it puts me at ease and it gives me reassurance that I'm creating a connection with the audience.
That's so brave of you too, because like trying to make people laugh is like the highest stakes situation you can be in. So you're cracking a joke. That's next level. That is next level.
It is, but at least with my personal style, there's a little bit of subterfuge to it because I like to say things very deadpan, so I have some plausible deniability if no one laughs, and that happens all the time. So I was like,
You've
oh, he
mastered.
just made some weird comment I don't understand, and it's like it's all fine.
Just let it go. Just let it go. And I
Yeah.
think that this is something that introverted or quiet leaders do really well is stating the obvious in a deadpan kind of way. And just hearing somebody point out the obvious can be humorous in a situation. But to your point, you can walk away from it if nobody laughs. It's like, oh, well, I didn't say anything absurd. I'm just stating the obvious. And introverts are more, I judge, attuned to the room, to the feeling, to what's going on. So it's easier to make that obvious statement and have it come across as humor. But I'll tell you what, I took stand-up comedy. I took a class on stand-up comedy because as a communications expert, I wanted to try different venues, and I think it is the pinnacle of like intensity, getting up in front of people and trying to make them laugh. So bravo to you, leading with humor.
I'll just say that is a higher stakes situation because people are expecting you to be funny. Like, make me laugh. And it's almost like, yeah, like you have to be really good and really, really land. And I'm just trying to sneak something past people. So it's a little bit lower stakes.
Well, I'll tell you, the first time I did it, it was great because I prepared. I had a solid 5 minute set that I had been trying out in class for a long time. When I went to do it the second time, it completely bombed because the audience was different and I didn't adjust the material to speak to the audience, which is something that I like to offer for people is, know your audience and be prepared, but don't over prepare. I want to be ready to speak about the things that I'm most passionate about, but I need to have my list and then put it aside. Never follow a script, right? If I follow a script, I'm going to forget a word and then the whole thing goes down like dominoes. But if I have
Hmm.
prepared my talking points and then I can just have them on the side, then I can show up with full resourcefulness in that meeting and not worry about like if I'm making the right point or something.
That's something that I've gone back and forth with or struggled with because, and actually, I think I did lean on scripting myself more initially. If you over script it, like to the point where you're almost, if you're not reading, then you're reading from memory. You've got your Shakespearean monologue prepared, and then as soon as you stumble, you're like, oh, I got to go back, and then you're like seeking on the tape, but your brain can handle bullet points much more easily, and then you just go back. Then in a way that the wording is less precious. Do we care too much about the exact words that are coming out?
There's so many ways to look at this. And of course, there is research to back up that our body language and tone of voice have a bigger impact than the words themselves. I like to think of it as presence. When a person comes in, it's their presence that you feel. You feel it before they open their mouth. You feel it before they even look up to the audience. You feel the presence and you know the kind of person that can walk in and light up the room without saying anything, right? That presence is what effectively makes whatever you have to say land. So presence determines influence in my mind. And to your question of like how much of what I'm saying, it really relies on the words that I'm saying themselves. Very little. It's very little about the words themselves. But what we'll find is you look at the trajectory of a person's career, the higher they go in their own personal development around leadership, the less they rely on the words. It's good to start out doing all the research, having all the facts, coming in with that deck. I've got the deck. I've got all the information. I'm ready for every argument. Bring it, kind of a thing. That is one level when a person can then go beyond that and be like, look, I don't need to prove myself. I don't need to prove everything I'm saying. I don't have to back up everything with the research footnotes. I know this information. I can communicate it in a sense with a sense of presence that makes it unquestionable. And I no longer have to go back and start filling in all the data points. People want a dialogue, not a download. It's
Mm.
important to have your facts. It's important to know the history, statistics, the whatever it is. It's important to know that, but people want to have a little bit more of a back and forth. Instead of like throwing the whole buffet at them, go ahead and take their order and bring them one serving at a time so that they can take in each one as they go.
It's so true. And it was one of the things that I encountered, kind of met some resistance as I got into different levels of leadership. There's just a lot of intense questioning. They're looking for the thought behind whatever you're presenting. You have to abstract your thinking so that you can speak it to a level who's with someone who's super intelligent, super experienced, has been there and done that, but couldn't possibly know those fine details.
Yes, what you're saying has a lot of validity in the fact that as a more senior leader, I'm relying on whomever on my team to come with all the background, the data, the details. And as a less senior leader, if I'm the one responsible for bringing the research, the data, the information, I need to remember that like questions and pushback, it's not a test of my
Mm.
knowledge. It's a test of the relationship. Is that person able to trust me to find the answer, not just be a walking encyclopedia? Is the senior leader that's pushing back or challenging or questioning my information? They're not doing it just to see if I can prove myself. They're doing it to see if they can trust me in the path that I've gone. And sometimes the answer is going to be, I don't know. And it's good to drop that when that's the truth. And it's also good to establish that rapport and trust with that person that, hey, I don't know that specific thing. These are the things that I can share with that. And I promise to get back to you with that bit of data that you're looking for specifically.
Right. It's really how you're showing up in that situation and what they're looking for. People, is this someone who takes complete ownership of whatever they're focused on? Are they reliable? Do they think things through? Are they the type of person who are going to be able to work well with others and help motivate others and orchestrate things to a good outcome? It's really about how you're responding and the attitude you have in those situations.
Yeah, I would, you said responding. That word really triggers me because Victor's insightful quote of, between stimulus and response, there is a pause. And in that little break is the ability for us to choose our reaction. We could react to whatever they're bringing at us, or we could take that moment in between and choose a response that's going to be coming from a more resourceful place, right? Leaders want to have people working with who are able to respond, not just react to everything as if it were a crisis. And I think as a quiet leader myself, when I began, I was always trying to prove myself. And so I was always trying to have the right
Mhm.
answer. I was always trying to be first. There's something called the delay bias. I don't know if you're familiar with it. We all have it. Delay
Mhm.
bias is that idea that if a person doesn't respond in a certain amount of time that we judge is important, we will see them as less than, right? The porch light's on, but nobody's home, right? And because we all have grown up in a school environment where the teacher would ask a question, and if you didn't answer, right, at the right amount of time, people would all see you as like incompetent in some way. And we carry that into the work world, and we are harder on ourselves than other people, quite honestly. So when somebody asks us a question or they push back, we have this innate response that we have to respond, and we have to respond quickly and concisely and correctly. And all of that pressure shuts down our ability to actually access our prefrontal cortex where all of our information is stored, and we go into survival mode and fight, flight, freeze, and we're unable to respond to that situation. So training ourselves ideally in low stakes situations to take that moment to respond, to consider our response, to take a pause, to get comfortable with the discomfort of a pause before responding allows us to have better interactions and overcome our own delay bias to connect with whomever the leader is and hopefully see their pushback as an opportunity for a heightened engagement with them. Who knows? It can feel like a fire hose, it can feel like a flamethrower. Who knows?
I've experienced both. Let's talk about that the pause there because that's one of central themes of my life. And when I was in school, at a certain point, I would get I would be really excited to share the answers. I think it started in third grade, and I would raise my hand, and then my brain would lock up. I'd get in, and I wasn't sure why. I didn't know what was going on, and then and just reading more about introversion, that this is very common with for introverts. We do process things deeply, and we think before we speak, and that's our natural rhythm, and that doesn't match with these work situations. And how do you give yourself time to think and overcome that delay bias?
It's such a relevant question, especially to this topic. How do you use a pause? Seth Godin aptly said that 1 to 2 second pause, people will think that you lost your place. We do. If a person just takes a quick pause, we think, oh, they forgot where they were going. Here we go. 3 to 5 seconds, people will believe it's on purpose. So my first hack for everybody is if you do lose your place, hold the pause 1 second longer, one beat longer, and people will think, wow, that's a professional speaker. That's great. So hold the pause a little bit. If you can hold your pause up until 10 seconds, which is a lifetime, even the people that are on their phones are going to look up to hear what it is that you have to say. So, practicing with the pause, getting comfortable with the discomfort of it is step number one. And try it out in low stakes situations. When you're at a Starbucks ordering coffee, try putting a pause in there just to hold that discomfort for a little while and get used to it in a low stake situation. Then when you get into a higher stake situation, you develop the muscle to hold the pause. But here is the key to pausing, what a lot of people get wrong. Pause where it's not expected. It's called the anticipatory pause. Learn to be the person who can pause in a sentence, not at the comma, not at the period, but somewhere in the line so that people know that there's more coming and they're waiting for you, right? Holding the anticipatory pause is where the real gold is. That's the person that's holding the meeting and able to hold that space because they're used to holding that anticipatory pause and keeping you hanging on what's going to come next. If you practice pausing, but it's at the comma or the period, people are going to interrupt you. But if you practice pausing somewhere in between where it's not exactly expected, people will get used to that rhythm and you'll develop a reputation of holding people's interest more.
Definitely gives me something to aspire to. I have pauses, but I'll admit that they're really not intentional. So I'm not sitting there as like, okay, I'm gonna pause and bring you along. And no, it's more like brain is buffering, waiting for more words to come in, that sort of thing. Which maybe, you need a combination of both.
You do, and it is developing the muscle. Everything that we learn to do, we're really bad at first, and then we get really good at. I would encourage everyone to practice the pause, practice the pause, practice the pause. And then in that situation where you throw your hand up because you have the answer, but then you forget it, you're used to holding the pause and you can find a way to find yourself back in your place. Now, getting back to that place requires some self mastery of some sort. Number one is to use your breath, using your breath, but it's the exhale, not the inhale. A lot of people don't know this. When you take a deep breath, it opens the rib cage. It causes your heart to beat faster because it has fill a larger cavity. So use the breath to calm yourself by taking a slow, long exhale and then holding that exhale with the chest cavity closed calms the heart down. Do this before you get into that meeting, before you raise your hand. Second thing, once you've used the breath to calm the physiology, the second part of it is to take up space. When I am physically taking up space, it sends a feedback loop to my brain that I feel safe here. If my feet are flat on the ground, if my shoulders are back, if my chest is lifted high, my chin is tucked in, I feel in taking up that space that I must feel comfortable taking up more space. And it sends a feedback loop to the brain that says, I'm okay. I'm okay here. So we can trick ourselves both with our breath and with our space to feel more safe to raise our hand, hold that pause because we practice it, and then deliver with eloquence and effectiveness.
So good. Let's think about the situation where the higher stakes situation. So like this is great. I've calmed you kind of walked us through calming in more everyday situations, and but now I am on stage. I am giving my keynote presentation, and maybe I have memorized things, and I just freeze in the middle of that, and then like you get the fight, flight, freeze. If I can, I'll practice that along with my pause. Um, what do I do in that situation? I want to call Salvatore and say, what do I do?
I appreciate it. And I think it's first of all, admit it's human. All of us have had this happen. Fight, flight, freeze is a total human amygdala hijack response to a set of circumstances and that stimulus that's coming at us. Number one is state the obvious. Own it. Say, oh, I forgot my spot, or oh, I need to think about that, or I'll come back to it. Like it relieves the pressure just to be human, and everybody wants to listen to people who are human. So it's okay to own the situation that you're in. Like just state the obvious, this is what's in it. But the biggest key I would offer to somebody going up on that keynote or going in front of the room to give that presentation is to reframe the rush. That initial adrenaline that you feel, that rush of emotions, or if it comes on in between, reframe it not as nervousness, but as excitement. Research shows that if we look at it a different way, it changes the way that we adapt to it. I like to give the analogy of a roller coaster ride. If you've been on a roller coaster, you can have your hands up and screaming in exhilaration, or you can have your hands up and screaming out of fear. Like it's your body is going through the same thing, but how you're interpreting it is what makes a difference. So reframe the rush of adrenaline, of emotion, as, oh, wait, I'm excited. I forgot what I was going to say because I'm so excited to tell you about everything that I've done on this project. I forgot I forgot my next point because I have so many points that I'm excited to share you. It changes our brain, allows us to have that spaciousness to speak the way that we want to. What did you do? What is your go-to when you do feel that fight, flight, freeze? What do you do innately in that meeting to help yourself get over a frozen moment or a I'm out of here moment?
Yeah, and that's just one of the things I've needed to work on. And for whatever reason, being on a stage and doing that public speaking, there's something I just enjoy about it, even though it never fails to make me nervous. I guess in some of these the higher stakes situations, I might occasionally, especially if I get something wrong, God forbid, like I said something wrong, or so there's an element of perfectionism in there where I could get thrown off my game. And so one of the things I've learned is breathing. It's deep breath and really trying to get back into my body. If I can really pay attention to my breath, if I get into a situation where I'm really more emotionally hijacked, then if I can let usually it's in a situation there's conversation, different people are speaking, let some other people take the topic for a minute or two, or give myself a chance to breathe. Sometimes it's different emotions that come up. Sometimes you can be triggered by defensiveness or fear, but sometimes they're triggered by anger. And I was like, okay, I really needed to take a beat here.
100%. I think that is the hardest challenge. I I've been doing this for 20 years. I've been sharing these tools and techniques, and I am practicing them all the time as well. And I will get into a situation and they're gone. Like, okay, you have upset me at this point, and I don't even remember what it is that I teach other people to do. Step one, breathe. Okay, right, right, breathe, breathe. Okay. Um, yeah, my go-to in those situations, especially if anger comes up, is you then me. It's a principle where I challenge myself to speak to my understanding of the other person's world, what their hopes are, what their fears are, what's going on in their world, just reiterating what they have shared with me so far. By forcing myself to focus on them and their world, even in my anger or what they've done, it helps me to start finding a way towards compassion or empathy. But on a whole nother level, it helps me connect with them because they begin to see me as understanding their world. And, people can't listen until they feel heard. So even though they upset me, I will just be like, ah, I can imagine that you're saying that because of. And then I will list off what authentically comes up for me, what I assume about their potential reasoning for saying that. And it allows me to find my way to a place of, I don't know, collaboration, especially when I feel that agitation.
That's a really great reframe. I think that you can generalize that to other situations. So what you asked, what are some of the ways you can calm yourself getting up, talking to a larger audience? And one thing I found is thinking about it's not about me. It's like, why am I doing this? I want to help people understand some of the changes we're making. I want to help people feel reassured or calm. I want to help people feel excited about the future. And so this is kind of taking that, so making it not about you and your reaction. And then you're like, okay, well, I can set this reaction aside because it's not about me, it's them. And this is a similar kind of reframe where, okay, that felt that feels upsetting to me, but really like what's going on with that other person. So it's coming back to the breath and being actually, if you can be curious about where that person is coming from, how can you help them? It's not about you. It's coming from a place of service.
I feel like we could spend like a whole session just talking about how to handle those moments where we feel agitated from whatever the person has said or done. Self-regulating tools are my favorite thing to go into YouTube rabbit holes of figuring out like how else can I
Hmm.
better regulate my senses. And I love what you just shared, though. I have a phrase, not about me, not about me, not about me. I will say it 10 times before I go into a contentious conversation. I will say it 10 times before I get up in front of people to speak to remind myself that it's about the message. It's about the truth that I have to share. It's about connecting my audience with that truth. That's what's important. It doesn't matter what that person's facial expression is trying to tell me. That facial expression may have nothing to do with this conversation. They could be hungry, right? They could be
Hmm.
thinking about that they had with somebody else earlier. So the breath, not about me. I'll do my third self-regulation, and that's the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. It's not mine. I don't actually know who authored this, but the it's a idea of focusing on 5 things that you can see, count them out, 4 things that you can hear, 3 things that you can touch, 2 things that you can smell, 1 thing that you can taste. By forcing ourselves to connect with our senses and engaging the brain to count them off, stops the perseveration, brings us back into our bodies. Counting as a way of like giving the brain something to do while focusing on things that bring me back to my senses allows me to be more present, more grounded, more in my body, and less apt to fight, flight, freeze in a situation. What other hacks do you have? What other self-regulation tools do you use?
I love the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. It's a great. I hadn't heard that before. It's a great, uh, gr- yeah, pulling. It's a mindfulness exercise. These are, another way of saying these pull you back into the present moment and help you inhabit your body. And so certainly different forms of breathing and counting. You can you can count the duration of your breaths in the meeting, and I'll do that walking and in different situations and during the day. And I think there's other things with like feeling. Can you sense energy in your hands or in your body? And do I have energy in my torso? And feeling throughout. And so I'd love if we can pull this back to um, presence, because I think this is something that a lot of introverts get wrong, is that you feel like, well, I don't, those people have presence, I don't have presence. You absolutely can have presence. You can develop that. And very likely when you're on your own or in your one-on-one conversation, you have tremendous presence. And it's really a question of, can you maintain that in a room? Can you allow your energy, which you have tremendous energy, can you allow that to be full and inhabit when there's a crowd? And I think what happens, a lot of introverts, we shut it down. We close off. We don't allow that energy to be, probably because we don't feel like it's safe. And so you're thinking about your like, what are things that I think about going into these meetings? It's safe to have my energy be here, out there, and fill the room. I think for introverts, it needs to come from an authentic place, and that's why I really love that you're framing that not about me. And I think not about me is going to be the title of this episode when I post it, because it's just that's the kernel of it. That's something that it's such a powerful reframe. It seems to work for me really well in changing the way I feel about a situation, and allows me to be much more present and much more authentically myself.
I love that. And I like the way you brought up presence and voice, by the way. And voice does convey so much. And we have the ability to use our voice from our head, from our throat, and from our body. And there's something about an embodied voice that commands a room. Voice is one of the things that I work on with clients, but I don't tell them about it until we've been doing it for a while because people dismiss it. People dismiss the idea of working on their voice as a tool to engage and to create presence. But there is no quicker way to make a big jump in one's communication than to begin using their voice in a different way. But to your point, you asked about presence, and the way I frame it is space, silence, stillness. People who have presence in a room take up space. Physically, they take up space. They physically take up space. Their elbows are off of their body as they're speaking. They're taking up space. They're filling it up. They have stillness. They move with graceful gestures, intentional, emphasizing gestures, versus a lot of movement around. And silence. People who have presence are able to hold that silence. We talked about the pause, but able to hold that silence with comfort. So space, stillness, and silence are keys to elevating a person's sense of presence. And the quick hack that I offer a lot of my clients to begin working towards that is to move 5% slower than anybody else in the room. It will demonstrate a sense of composure and intentionality and will come across as more confident in the room as well.
Well, I know you have a lot of frameworks here, and you've been cultivating this practice for over 20 years. And I know you've been working on a book to capture a lot of these. Could you tell us a little bit about that? How's it going?
And the perfectionist me doesn't ever want to stop writing this book, but it's time to get it out there. After 20 years, I'm putting all the frameworks, the techniques, the strategies in one book. The book is called Clear and Compelling. Clear and Compelling. And you can go to clearandcompellingplaybook.com to be alerted. You get a free chapter, and then you can also be alerted when it actually drops on Amazon. It's my way of sharing all of the strategies that I find help quiet leaders, data-driven folks, analytical leaders turn all of that information into messages that resonate and inspire.
Sounds awesome. I'm definitely downloading my copy after this, and look forward to seeing that out there. You have such a wealth of information and are so thoughtful, Salvatore. I really appreciate you coming on my show and talking about some of these topics.
Thank you for all that you're doing for all the quiet leaders out there. I think what I most admire is that you're using lived experience to encourage other people, and we need more people like you. Thank you.
Thank you for that.